Okay, so today we're going to talk about solving quadratics by completing the square. The reason we need completing the square is not everything is factorable. If you look at this first example on our paper, I have x squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. If I tried to factor this, I would need two numbers that multiply to 2 and add up to negative 4, and there are no such numbers, so I need something else. And today we're going to talk about something called completing the square. This is brand new for you. Make sure you take really good notes. You can even have flashcards if you want. There will be pop quizzes on the steps for completing the square, and I will let you use your notes for them, so make sure you write the steps down really well. Okay, so here we go. What are the steps? Well, step 1 is to move the c term to the right side. So you need to remember that quadratics are in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 when we're solving them. So the c term is your constant term, and when you're completing the square you need that to get out of the way. So in this example I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I have x squared minus 4x equals negative 2. Step 2, we make what we call the b list. And here's your b list. You write down what your b value is. Well, again, with ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, in this case b, the term attached to x, is negative 4. Then you need to write down what half of that b value is. In this case, half of negative 4 is negative 2. And then you need to write down what that half b value would be when we square it. Negative 2 all squared is positive 4. For step 3, you add the half b squared term to both sides. Because it's an equation, what you do to one side of the equation you must do to the other. So for this example, we're going to add 4 to both sides. So I have x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals negative 2 plus 4. Okay. For step 4, your left side is now a perfect square. That's why we call it completing the square. We have just created a perfect square trinomial. We completed a square. Well, why do we care? We care because it makes it easier to solve. So you're going to rewrite it as x plus your b term all squared. Now that your left side is a perfect square, you're going to rewrite it as x plus your b term all squared. So here I have x, my b term is negative 2, so plus a negative is minus 2 all squared. And while you're at it, you simplify the right side. Negative 2 plus 4 is 2. And for your final, you solve. Remember a couple of things. Remember, undo squaring by square rooting, and you need to plus or minus square root your right side. Here's what I mean. I have x minus 2 all squared equals 2. So I'm going to undo this squaring by square rooting. So when I square root this side, that square root cancels out the squared, and I'm left with x minus 2. Because I square rooted the left side, I also need to square root the right side, but I need two solutions because it's quadratic. So it's plus or minus the square root of 2. Never forget that plus or minus sign. And then your last step is to get x alone. Add 2 to both sides. So x is 2, that 2 that I added, plus or minus the square root of 2. And you're done. Just a little side note, you could have written your answer as plus or minus root 2 plus 2, but I worry about us getting sloppy and thinking that that positive 2 is under the square root when it is, in fact is not. Okay, so those are your steps. Let's do one more following those same steps. So here we're going to solve x squared plus 8x minus 11 equals 0. Okay, again, step 1, Move your C term to the right side. Get it out of the way. It's going to add 11 to both sides. Step 2, make your B list off to the side. Here B is 8. Half of B is 4. Half of B squared, 4 squared is 16. Add that half B squared to both sides. So I add 16 to both sides. Step 4, this left side is now a perfect square. We're going to write it that way. So I'm going to have in parentheses squared my x plus my b term. X plus 4 all squared is the same as x squared plus 8x plus 16. And I clean up the right side. 11 plus 16 is 27. Solve. We're going to undo the squaring by square rooting, so that's just x plus 4. On the right, I plus or minus the square root of 27. And I finish up by getting x alone, subtract 4 from both sides. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 27. And that is it for the must-do section. I'll make a second video for should and could, which are a little more complicated. Make sure you have your steps. Make sure you can do those 2 basic style problems.